The moment Judge Stephen Morales entered the courtroom, the restless whispers vanished as if someone had turned off a switch. He moved with calm authority, taking his seat and scanning the room with those sharp, intelligent eyes. When his gaze stopped on Michael, my son, there was a brief flicker of sympathy, just for a second, before it hardened into something else entirely. Then his eyes found me. I saw the recognition strike him like lightning. His expression changed. Shock, disbelief, like he was staring at a ghost he thought was long gone. Walking into that courtroom again after all those years felt like stepping back into a place I had sworn never to revisit. Even now, remembering it sends a chill through my chest. But telling this story matters. It's not easy, and it still hurts, but maybe someone out there will understand. And if you do, if you can spare a moment to like this video, please know it would mean the world to an old woman who's simply sharing her heart. It reminds me that I'm not alone in this. I walked slowly to the defense table, every step heavy with memories. My hand trembled as I placed my old leather briefcase on the polished wood. The sound of it hitting the table echoed sharply through the silent room, like a declaration that I was back, and this time, I wasn't going to back down. Pulling out the chair, I sat beside my son. His hand was cold, trembling in mine. The air was so still you could hear the faint scratching of the clerk's pen as she recorded the proceedings. Then Judge Morales leaned forward. His usual sternness was gone. His eyes were wide, his voice low and unsteady as he asked, "Why are you here?" The question floated in the air like a cold breeze. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, tightened her jaw. I caught the suspicion flashing in her eyes. Her parents began whispering behind her, their faces twisted in confusion and distrust. Michael, sitting beside me, looked up with tired, uncertain eyes. In them, I saw something faint but bright, a spark of hope he didn't even realize he still had. Seeing that almost broke me. None of them knew the truth. Not Jessica, not her family, not even my son. They didn't know that I wasn't just a mother trying to protect her child. A long time ago, in another life, in a city that both built and broke me, people used to know my name. And in old Chicago, that name once carried power. Just 1 hour earlier, the Chicago sky was a dull, heavy gray. One of those mornings when the air itself feels like it's holding its breath. I stood beside our car, helping Michael take one shaky step after another. His weakness wasn't only in his injured leg. It was in the way he tried to ignore the stares from the small crowd gathering near the courthouse steps. The church bells nearby began to toll, each ring deep and mournful, as if warning of the battle that was about to begin. My hand tightened around the handle of my briefcase, the leather worn and faded. Inside were not just papers, but our last fragments of hope, our future, and the proof of everything we had endured. A small crowd had gathered outside, neighbors, onlookers, and a few reporters with cameras ready. Their whispers buzzed like insects. "It's the Villisenor divorce," someone murmured. "They say it's going to be ugly. Poor man." Their pity stung, but I kept my expression calm, unreadable. I had long ago learned how to hide my pain behind a mask of strength. Then, a sleek luxury car pulled up, drawing everyone's attention. The door opened, and Jessica stepped out. She was radiant in a bright red dress, the color of pride and defiance. Her dark sunglasses hid her eyes, but not the smug curve of her lips. Behind her came her parents and brother, walking tall as if the courthouse steps already belonged to them. The sight turned my stomach. They had no idea what my son and I had been through. The nights of sleepless worry, the endless struggle to survive. I motioned for Michael to walk ahead. He moved slowly, leaning on this crutch, his once broad shoulders hunched as though he carried the whole world's weight on his back. Every labored step he took felt like a knife through my chest. People stared. Some whispered. Others simply looked away. I wanted to scream, to tell them all that this man had built his life from nothing, that every inch of his strength had been earned. But instead, I just tightened my grip on my briefcase and kept walking beside him, holding my head high. When we entered the courtroom, the air was thick, part dust, part tension, part the scent of old wood and ink. Jessica was already seated at the defendant's table, one leg crossed over the other, her red heel tapping impatiently against the floor. Tap, tap, tap. Each sound was a taunt. When Michael appeared at the doorway, she leaned toward her mother and whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Look at him, nothing but a crippled old man." Her mother smirked. Laughter flickered between them. My blood boiled, but I said nothing. I swallowed my anger, forcing it down where it could burn quietly. Michael lowered his gaze, trying to hide the pain that twisted across his face. He sat slowly in the wooden chair for the plaintiff, gripping his crutch so tightly his knuckles turned white. Watching him like that tore something inside me. This was the son I had raised alone, the boy I had once carried through storms, the man who had promised to build a home that no one could ever take away from us. Now he sat here, being humiliated by the same woman who once vowed to love him forever. Jessica's lawyer, Jennifer Rivers, a face I recognized from another lifetime, stood up with practiced arrogance. She placed a thick folder of documents on the table, her tone cold and confident. "Your Honor, we intend to prove that my client's husband, Mr. Michael Villisenor, is no longer capable of performing his duties as a husband and a father." Each word struck like a hammer to my chest. I wanted to rise right then and shout that they were wrong, that my son was still strong, still a father, still a man worthy of respect. But I didn't. Not yet. Because my moment hadn't come. And when it did, they would finally remember who I was. Long before that tense courtroom morning, long before Jessica's red heels echoed on those cold marble floors, there was a time when my son Michael Villisenor was a young man full of dreams, warmth, and fierce determination. He wasn't born into wealth or privilege. Our family never had much, but what we lacked in money, we made up for in loyalty and love. Michael was the kind of boy who'd give his lunch away if someone else was hungry. I used to watch him from our small kitchen window, helping neighbors carry groceries, fixing broken bikes for kids who couldn't afford repairs, always smiling even when life gave him little reason to. When his father, Carlos Villisenor, passed away unexpectedly, he was only 17. That day changed him forever. He didn't cry much, at least not where I could see, but something in his eyes hardened. He promised me that he would take care of me, that he would make his father proud. And he did. After finishing school, he found work in a small auto shop on the south side of Chicago. It wasn't glamorous. His hands were always stained with oil, his clothes smelt of metal and sweat, but he never complained. Each paycheck, no matter how small, went first toward rent and groceries for us, then savings for a better future. I remember the first time he met Jessica. It was a summer afternoon, the kind where the air hums with heat and possibility. She had come into the shop with her father's luxury car, Something sleek, shiny, and clearly out of place in our neighborhood. Michael, covered in grease, smiled as he wiped his hands on a rag and said politely, "Good afternoon, ma'am. What seems to be the problem?" Jessica tilted her sunglasses down just enough to reveal her striking green eyes. She looked him over, not unkindly, but with that quiet curiosity of someone who's not used to people like him. "It's making a noise," she said, "a clicking sound when I turn." Michael nodded, already listening with his whole heart. "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." And that was how it began. One conversation, one spark, one moment that would change everything. Over the weeks that followed, she kept finding reasons to come back. First for minor tune-ups, then tire checks, then simply for coffee. I didn't think much.
They didn't speak for hours. Later that night, Michael came to my house. His face was pale, his voice low. "Mom," he said, trembling, "I think she's seeing someone else." I tried to stay calm. I told him to talk to her, to fight for his marriage. But deep down, a mother knows when something is truly broken. Weeks passed in silence. Then came the accident. Michael was working overtime when one of the car lifts in the shop malfunctioned. It collapsed without warning, pinning him under the frame of a sedan. He was rushed to the hospital with a shattered leg, broken ribs, and internal bleeding. The doctor said he was lucky to be alive. For days, I sat beside his hospital bed, praying he would wake up. When he finally did, his first words were, "Where's Jessica?" But she never came. She didn't visit. Not once. When he was discharged, still weak and unable to walk properly, he asked me to drive him home. When we arrived, the apartment was half empty. Jessica was gone. So were most of the things they owned. She had taken their savings, the car, and even some of the furniture. She left nothing but a short note on the counter that said, "I can't do this anymore. You're not the man I married." I will never forget the sound of my son breaking down that night. His sobs filled the small apartment like thunder in a hollow room. But even after all that, Michael refused to hate her. He said maybe she was just lost, confused, scared. He still believed she'd come back. I, on the other hand, knew better. Because a mother can see evil long before her child does. After Jessica left, the days grew long and heavy. The walls of Michael's apartment, once filled with laughter and plans, now echoed with silence. He could barely move without wincing. His body was healing, but his spirit was shattered. He'd sit by the window for hours, staring at the empty street below. Sometimes he'd whisper her name like it might bring her back. I wanted to comfort him, but there are wounds even a mother's love can't reach. I spent my days caring for him, helping him bathe, making meals he barely touched, and reminding him to take his medication. At night, when I was sure he was asleep, I would cry quietly in the kitchen. I cried for the son who had given everything to someone who threw it all away. Then one afternoon, everything changed. A man in a dark suit arrived at our door. His tone was professional, but his eyes were full of discomfort as he handed Michael an envelope. "You've been served," he said, avoiding eye contact. Inside were divorce papers. Jessica was filing for full custody of Liam, accusing Michael of being unfit, unemployed, and unstable. She even claimed he had a violent temper. I felt the blood drain from my face as I read those lies. My son, gentle, patient, kind, had never raised his voice to anyone, not even in anger. Michael sat frozen for a long time, the papers trembling in his hands. "She's taking my son away," he whispered. "Mom, she's really doing this." The next few weeks were torture. Jessica's lawyer, a sharp-tongued woman named Jennifer Rivers, moved fast. They painted Michael as a broken man, crippled, bitter, incapable of providing a safe home. Their words were poison, and they spread like wildfire. Even neighbors who once admired Michael began to whisper behind his back. I wanted to fight back immediately, but Michael stopped me. "Mom, please, I'll handle it," he said softly. "I don't want to make things worse." He still believed there was goodness in Jessica, that somehow she'd come to her senses before the court date. But I knew better. Jessica had changed. She wasn't the same woman who once sat in my kitchen laughing over coffee. Her heart had turned cold. When we finally saw her again, months later, she was walking hand in hand with another man, a wealthy real estate developer named Daniel Hartman. They were smiling, carefree, as if the past had been erased. Michael saw them outside a grocery store. He froze, his crutch slipping slightly. As he stared, Jessica noticed him but didn't flinch. She tightened her grip on Daniel's arm and said coldly, "You shouldn't be here." Her voice was like ice. "I just wanted to see my son," Michael said quietly. "Please, Jessica, let me talk to him for a minute." She shook her head, her expression unreadable. "Liam doesn't need to see you like this." Like this. Those two words sliced deeper than any knife could. After she left, Michael stood there in silence, tears running down his face. He didn't speak for hours afterwards. The custody battle dragged on for months. Every hearing was another wound. Jessica came to court in designer clothes, her hair perfectly done, her lawyer speaking confidently about financial stability and environmental safety. And there was Michael, limping, struggling, wearing the same worn suit he'd owned for years. The judge seemed to pity him, but pity wasn't enough. In the end, Jessica got primary custody. Michael was allowed 2 weekends a month with Liam, if she agreed. For a while, she didn't. She found excuses. "Liam's sick. We're busy. He has school projects." Weeks became months, without a single visit. Then one day, a small miracle happened. Jessica dropped Liam off unexpectedly. She didn't come inside, just waved from the car and said, "He's yours for the weekend. Don't call me." Michael's face lit up. He scooped Liam into his arms and held him close, breathing in the scent of his son's hair like it was air itself. For those 2 days, my son was alive again. They played board games, watched cartoons, and walked, slowly, to the park. Liam's laughter filled our small home, warming every corner of it. But as with every miracle, it didn't last. That Sunday evening, when Michael dropped Liam back to Jessica's house, something terrible happened. Jessica was waiting outside, with Daniel. When she saw Michael's old car pulling up, she crossed her arms, her expression already angry. "You're late," she snapped. "Only by 10 minutes, Michael replied gently. "He wanted to say goodbye to Grandma." "You don't respect my time," she snapped, grabbing Liam's arm. "This is why you'll never be a real father." Daniel laughed quietly beside her. "Let's go inside, Jess. He's not worth it." Michael stepped forward. "Don't talk about me in front of my son." Jessica turned sharply, her voice rising. "What are you going to do about it, Michael? Limp over here and stop me?" The words hit like bullets. Liam started crying, confused and scared. Michael bent down and whispered to him, "It's okay, buddy. Daddy loves you. Always." He tried to hug his son one last time, but Jessica pulled the boy away and slammed the door. That night, Michael came home silent. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. The light from the small lamp flickered across his face, pale and hollow. "Mom," he said softly, "I don't think I can do this anymore." "You can," I told him. "We'll get through this together." He smiled faintly, that same gentle smile I'd seen since he was a boy. Then he stood up, kissed my forehead, and said, "Thank you for everything." Those were the last words he ever said to me. The next morning, I found him in the garage. The car engine was running. My son, my beautiful broken boy, was gone. The world went silent that day. I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. I just held his hand, still warm, and whispered his name over and over until my voice was gone. Jessica came to the funeral. She wore black but didn't shed a tear. When I tried to look at her, she turned away. As people left their condolences and the last of the flowers wilted, I made a promise over my son's grave. They will answer for this, Michael. Every one of them. I swear.
And the man she had run off with, Daniel Hartman, wasn't just a lover. He was her accomplice. Together, they had built their wealth off the money and credit they'd stolen from Michael. But that wasn't even the worst of it. Through my investigation, I discovered something that froze my blood. Michael's accident at the auto shop, the one that crushed his leg and nearly killed him, hadn't been an accident at all. I found a retired mechanic who finally spoke after years of silence. His hands trembled as he told me how the hydraulic lift had been tampered with, a bolt removed, a safety valve loosened. Someone had wanted that lift to fail. And the man who had serviced it the day before? Daniel Hartman. That was the moment everything inside me shifted. Grief turned into purpose. Fear turned into fire. I gathered my old contacts, reopened my license, and began preparing the case that would expose them all. When I filed the petition to reopen Michael's case, claiming new evidence of fraud, financial abuse, and potential criminal intent, the judge assigned was none other than Judge Stephen Morales, an old colleague of mine from decades earlier. I hadn't seen him since my retirement. He didn't know what had become of me, or that I was back for justice. That's why when he saw me walk into that courtroom beside my son's memory, alive through my fight, his shock was genuine. That day, as the proceedings began, Jessica sat with the same air of superiority she always carried. Dressed in tailored gray, every inch of her screamed control and confidence. Her lawyer, Jennifer Rivers, stood ready, files neatly arranged, her tone crisp as glass. "Your Honor," she began smoothly, "this case is based on emotion, not law. My client has already endured enough harassment from the plaintiff's family. These allegations—" I rose from my seat, interrupting her before she could finish. My voice was calm, but carried the weight of years. "With all due respect, counsel, emotion doesn't forge bank statements. Emotion doesn't create loan applications signed with forged signatures, and emotion doesn't remove bolts from industrial equipment." The courtroom fell silent. Judge Morales leaned forward. "Mrs. Villisenor, are you representing your son's estate yourself?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said steady, "because no one else will fight for him like I can." Jessica turned sharply toward me, her lips parting slightly in disbelief. For the first time, I saw uncertainty in her eyes. I continued, pulling out the evidence I'd spent years collecting: copies of transactions, letters, recordings, sworn statements. Every page told the same story: manipulation, deceit, and greed. Jennifer tried to object repeatedly, but each time I countered with precision. It was like muscle memory, years of legal training flowing through me effortlessly. When I played the recording of Daniel's conversation with the mechanic, where he bragged about putting that loser out of commission, gasps rippled through the courtroom. Jessica's face turned pale. Her parents whispered frantically, but she sat frozen, her confidence crumbling. I turned toward her then, not as an attorney, not even as a witness, but as a mother. You didn't just destroy a marriage, Jessica. You destroyed a life. You left a man to die in shame and pain, and you taught your son to believe his father didn't love him. Jessica's lips trembled, but no words came out. Then, from the back of the courtroom, the door opened quietly. A young man, tall, serious, with familiar blue eyes, walked in. It was Liam. He was grown now, nearly 20, wearing a simple gray suit. I hadn't seen him since he was a little boy. For a second, my heart stopped. He looked around the courtroom, confused, until his gaze found mine, and in that instant I saw it. Recognition, the same spark that once shone in Michael's eyes. The clerk whispered something to the judge, who nodded. "Mr. Liam Villisenor, you've requested to speak?" Liam stepped forward, his voice quiet but firm. "Yes, Your Honor. I've seen the documents. I've read the letters my grandmother sent me, the ones my mother hid." Jessica's head snapped toward him. "Liam, stop!" But he didn't. All these years, I thought my dad abandoned me. I thought he didn't care. But he did. She lied. They both lied. He turned toward Daniel, who sat frozen in his seat. "You killed him." The courtroom erupted. Murmurs, gasps, the clatter of pens hitting desks. The judge had to bang his gavel for silence. Jessica covered her face with trembling hands, tears slipping through her fingers. Daniel just sat there, jaw tight, eyes darting toward the exits like a trapped animal. And in that moment, I knew the truth had finally surfaced. Justice was no longer a dream. It was breathing right in front of me. The courtroom had never been so still. The only sound was the faint hum of the overhead lights and the trembling breath of everyone inside. Jessica sat frozen, her face pale and streaked with tears. Daniel refused to meet anyone's eyes. Liam stood in the center, his voice still echoing in the room, his courage shining through the years of lies he'd been forced to believe. Judge Morales took a long, deep breath, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice carried both sorrow and authority. "This court has heard enough." He looked directly at me first, then at Jessica. "The evidence presented is overwhelming: financial fraud, forged signatures, deception, and now a recording implying deliberate tampering of safety equipment that led to injury." Jessica flinched. Daniel's hands tightened into fists. "Mrs. Villisenor," the judge continued, his tone softer, "you have fought not only for justice, but for truth, for your son, for your family, and for the integrity of the law itself. The court thanks you." My eyes filled with tears I'd held back for years. I lowered my head in silence, whispering Michael's name under my breath. Then came the verdict. This court rules in favor of the estate of Michael Villisenor. All assets acquired by fraudulent means are to be returned. Criminal charges will be filed against Daniel Hartman and Jessica Hartman for conspiracy, financial abuse, and obstruction of justice. The gavel struck. 3 sharp knocks that sounded like thunder after a long, merciless storm. Jessica let out a quiet sob, covering her face. Daniel tried to stand, but the bailiff was already beside him. For the first time, his arrogance vanished, replaced with fear. As they were escorted out, Jessica looked back. For a brief moment, her eyes met mine. There was no hatred there anymore, just a hollow emptiness, as if she was seeing herself clearly for the first time. I didn't look away. I simply whispered, "May God forgive you." After the courtroom emptied, Liam approached me slowly. For a second, he hesitated, then, without a word, he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me. It was the same embrace his father had once given me, warm, strong, and full of unspoken love. "I'm sorry, Grandma," he said, his voice shaking. "I didn't know. She told me such horrible things about him, about you, but I know the truth now." I held him tightly, my tears falling freely at last. "None of that matters anymore," I whispered. "You're here. That's all your father ever wanted." Outside the courthouse, the sun had finally broken through the clouds. The light was golden, soft, and warm, washing over the steps where this long journey had begun. Liam helped me walk down carefully, his arm steady around mine. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of grief pressing on my chest. I felt Michael there with us, somewhere in that light, smiling the way he always did when peace finally found him. We stopped at the bottom of the stairs. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but I didn't care. I turned to the sky and whispered, "It's over now, my boy. You can rest." Liam stood quietly beside me, and together we looked toward the horizon. Life had taken so much from us, but it had given us something back too, truth. And sometimes that's the only kind of justice the world can truly offer.